Hello, my three faithful readers for Song of Mornius, my book. I feel like making a short video just discussing why there's this huge lull between the chapters now. I kind of knew this was going to happen, and I think I warned at certain points that this would likely happen because I'm having to recreate the end, and endings are really hard. Endings, there's so much that needs to be done. Everything needs to be... It's a good idea to not leave loose ends. I hate movies when I go see a movie and I'm initially happy with the movie. I'm driving home, oh, that was really good. And then suddenly I'll be like, wait a minute, what happened to so-and-so? I hate that. And then you don't ever know, right? So I feel like endings not only... First of all, the climax has happened. So, you know, anything after that climax is kind of, what's the word? Anticlimactic. You know, in good movies, you have the big, I was just thinking this, like Star Wars, you know, you have the Death Star explode. How quickly that movie ended after that moment, because that was the big climax. You know, there was they land, they hug each other, they talk about fixing R2, and then you have the do 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 do. I'm totally out of tune. I'm trying to think of the dun 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 dun. The march where they're going down. You know, they're going to the they're past all the ranks of the rebel ranks to the dais where they get the little medal, and that's the end. Do 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 do. The end. They scroll up and it's the end of the movie. But with writing, sorry for my attempt to make music, but the ending of books is a little different. I mean, you can't really end things like that, especially Star Wars. Yet, you know, there's going to be sequels. I highly doubt there's going to be any sequel to this story. There's going to be, I think I'm going to write other stories on Talonkai, like Cray and the Giants, his life among the Giants. I think there's a lot of potential to that. But this particular storyline, this is the end of this particular storyline. So there's no trilogy with Star Wars. Well, you know, there's going to be other stuff that happens, but that's the next movie. Trilogies are a little bit different. Same with like Lord of the Rings. You have, well, there's loose ends, but you trust that the next movie will cover some of those loose ends and you'll eventually get to find out. So yeah, it's like, it's anticlimactic, but it still has to be interesting, and it has to kind of answer the questions that are still there and make a conclusion to certain problems that have been in the story. You know, individual characters in their... Kind of like the Wizard of Oz. At the end of the Wizard of Oz, you have the main characters all get their wish, or sort of. There's like a answer to the problems that those characters have. But it's kind of like that. You have to have kind of this answer to some of the things to make everything be, you know. Unless, of course, you want a sad ending, and you could just have everybody die, you know. But if you don't want an ending like that, then there has to be. It's called wordsmithing. And pardon me, I have a cold, so I talk really even more nasal than usual. But yeah, wordsmithing. It's like when I was first writing, I had a network. It was Genie, which was a DOS program that went online, and there was there were several communities of writers on Genie, and I was blessed with the input of some professional writers. I had one even read the very, very, very earliest first draft of Mornius, a woman who had written 20 books. Anyway, she actually said some good things, even though it was absolutely crap at that time. But she gave me enough good input that I felt like, ooh, you know, this has potential. So yeah, I had the input of professional writers and what these professional writers would say, and I've seen this said before: write every day. Just write. Get in the habit of writing every day. And I did. I wrote I set myself a minimum of 3 pages. Okay, at the very least, I will write 3 pages a day. The end results of doing that, yes, granted, it got me into the habit, and it kind of morphed from there to the point where I was sometimes writing entire chapters in a day. And these things would be 20, 30 pages long, these chapters. Really, really long. That's why now when I'm going through, and well, not anymore, but when I was working on the earlier part of the book, I was finding these long chapters, and I was saying, well, I'm splitting this one up. I'm splitting this one up. They're just so frickin' long, you know. So I did a lot of breaking the chapters up, which is why there's at least 50 chapters now instead of the original 42, because I did a lot of breaking up the chapters. But the point is, I just wrote for quantity. Okay, you write, pound out these chapters, get in the habit of writing every day, whether or not you're remotely in the mood to write. Just write. Just get in that habit. And that's how I wrote. So the original drafts of Mornius, there was so much. There was a lot of bad writing, because I would write on days that I wasn't really on fire. And then I'd go back and I'd be like, and so then I had to go back. And that's probably why it had, like, before I lost all of it, or most of it, it had gone through about 19 rewrites, because there was so much filler in this, because of the days that I wrote when I wasn't wordsmithing. I was just cranking out, and then I go back and read it, but like, you know. So I find now approaching Mornius, and I've been doing this all along, but now it's even more because of the importance of the end of the chapters. The end of the book is just so important. But what I've found throughout writing, or restoring, recreating this book, is I'm not writing like I used to. What I'm finding is I will put down stuff, and then I'll go back and I'll go through what I put down, and it's kind of like taking a piece of clay and working it with your hands and refining the shape of, you're trying to sculpt something, so you're molding it. And at first it might be this crude shape, and you mold it, and then it starts to resemble what you're trying for, and then you do some more work and some more, and maybe pull some of the clay off, and continue to form, and maybe then you start adding texture and depth and definition and all this stuff, and eventually you have something that resembles a work of art instead of just a lump or a crude shape. When I first throw down the words, and I'm trying to only do this when I'm on fire, which is my trying to say writing well. When things are clicking, I'm trying to limit myself to write only when the wheels are really clicking. But then I go back and I look at what I've done, and there's a lot of things that I find, oh, well, that's redundant to that, or this word is twice in the same sentence, or just the way the phrasing of a sentence is. Maybe I use the same sort of phrasing 3 or 4 times in a row. And I find these things, and then it's like I'm refining them. I rearrange sentences, I pull sentences out, I add things to it. I see where, and I read out loud, because sometimes reading out loud, I will actually read a sentence differently than it's written, and then I'll realize that the way I read it sounds better than the way I wrote it, and then I'll change it to what I just said. Like, oh, this is the way authentic language would sound versus what I actually wrote. And so I go back, and I go back several times, and I might not have finished the chapter yet. It's like, okay, let's see what I've written so far, and I'll read it out loud and go, oh, and then it's like I start tweaking individual paragraphs. Oh, this word isn't needed. Oh, we can do this, and we can change this word to this because this word is stronger than this word. This word invokes a better image than this word does. So I craft the words, the paragraphs that I have already put down. I start crafting them and read them out loud over and over as I'm crafting, and to the point where I'm going, ooh, that sounds really good. Ooh, I like the way that paragraph sounds. That's, and then I move on to the next paragraph, and I just kind of go down the thing, and then I'll get to something, ooh, I like this, I was really on fire when I wrote this, but then the very next paragraph, oh, this needs work, or I really hate this, and then I find myself sometimes pulling out entire sentences, or rearranging, or sometimes I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense at all, and then I have to rework. It's just, that's what I'm doing now with chapter 50. It's not completely written. I've written maybe half of it, and I'm not very happy with it right now, but it's trying to think, okay, but there's been many chapters that I have started out not happy with, and I worked on them, and work on them, and then in fact, chapter 49 for a little while was that way. I didn't really like how it was going, and then suddenly it just fell together. A lot of times if I'm not really on fire with my writing, I'm not really in the mood, if I just go and I start reading what I have in that chapter, I start to work on it, start to tweak it, and eventually I'm starting to go, wow, I'm really on fire right now. I'm really putting out some good stuff with remolding these chapters, these paragraphs, so they sound better. Maybe I need to write some new stuff to this chapter, and then I go and I start writing new stuff. So that's where I am right now with 50. I am putting it down, but it's not all there, and I'm just kind of crafting it, and I'm trying to take my time, because I really feel like quality, if I take my time and I really work those paragraphs so they flow together one to the next, and each paragraph has a little bang to it, a little something special to it, like, ooh, I like that phrase, that's a really good phrase. Every paragraph has a little something, so it's not just filler, but it's important, and it's interesting, and it sounds good, then when I have this thing done and I go back through it, there will be not nearly so much that needs to be done in a rewrite. Maybe the rewrite of this story will be just tweaking things, like taking out the word then that I sometimes use too often. I'm trying not to do that, but I noticed that I used the word then a lot. Then such and such said, then so-and-so said da-da-da-da-da, instead of so-and-so said da-da-da. Then is a word that isn't always necessary. It's a filler word. So, but yeah, when I go through this again as a rewrite, or if I'm lucky, I have an editor go through this, there's going to be changes, but I highly doubt I'm going to be ripping out entire chunks like I was with the earlier rewrites of this book. So that's where I am right now. I feel like talking about my story, and so that's where I am right now. I'm sorry that people are having to wait, but I'm kind of happier with the chapters because of this different way of writing. This make it as good as it can be the first time approach, and not crank out pages just for the sake of cranking out pages, but trying for something that's polished and sounds good when you read it, that isn't cumbersome. And that's another thing. I sometimes try to use words that, for the sake of, ooh, I could use this fancy big word here. Like, I have Tarek shout in chapter 50. Tarek shouts something. And today I was like, oh, I could have Tarek exclaims. So I went and I changed it to exclaims. And then I read the paragraph back and I'm like, Tarek exclaims. And it just didn't fit. It was like, oh, it's a very impressive word, much more impressive than shouts. But I took it out and put shouts back in, because it doesn't, sometimes, and I think this is a problem that a lot of new writers do, and I know I did it a lot when I first started writing, and I still sometimes do. You think an archaic word is better because, it's not so common, or words that are not common. Let's pepper our writing with all these uncommon words that people don't read or hear every day. And to make ourselves sound like we have a really big vocabulary and be really impressive, make it sound like we're better writers than we really are. I did that when I first started, and I think a lot of writers do, and I try to avoid that now. At the same time, if I use a word, there was a scene in chapter 49, where Malian is chasing, or he's actually, this is in the chamber when Malian is kind of hovered over Avalar and camera, and actually, no, it's the scene where they're being chased by him down the tunnel, and I'm referring to his talons. And at one point, I had to change the word to nails, because it's like, I can't use talons, and how many other words are there for claws, nails, talons, right? So that kind of, you don't want to use the same word over and over. For that reason, you might want to change it up to something else. But just to put it in a word because it sounds more impressive, not always a good idea. So that's another thing that I'm trying to avoid doing that I did originally with this book. So, which also, when I went back and I was reading the chapters before I was putting them back, restoring them, I was like, oh, this is so melodramatic. A lot of the melodramatic stuff happened because I was not writing in a natural way. I was writing in a way that I thought would impress. Not the way I would normally, not my natural voice, basically. So this is turning into a long video. I just wanted to say that I am working on chapter 50. I'm not even sure I am going to go with what I have. I might take some things out, but I'm trying very hard to make it interesting, even though it's anticlimactic. There's a big word. Even though it's anticlimactic, I'm trying to make it interesting and good to read. Something that would be, that reads well. That's interesting and reads well. And closing of a story is, it's like I want to do justice to these characters that I've become very fond of. And it's a lot of work to put together a book. When you get to the end, it's like, I think endings are even more important than starts, although starts are huge because you want to capture the publisher's attention, the editor, whatever, the guy who's picking up from the slush pile and looking at the first couple sentences. Those first couple sentences are like critically important to getting the attention of a potential publisher. But the ending is just, that's more something you do for the characters. You want to do them justice. You want to finish their story. I'm thinking like Lord of the Rings when the third movie, when Sam goes home to his family. It's like you have this really sad little ending with Frodo going off into the white light, and that's probably where the movie should end. But it doesn't end there because we want to give Sam a little extra, he lived happily ever after thing, so that was there for Sam, At least that's how I saw that scene, little thing with him coming home, at the end. That's kind of what I'm doing now with my characters. I'm giving them that little, okay, now this is what happens. This is how they carry on, whatever. Of course, the climax isn't quite over. There's still a little bit more of that too. It's not just, they lived happily ever after, or they all died tragically. There's more. There's still stuff that's going to be kind of cool. I'm not going to say that this is really so boring. It's not boring. It's just it's like changing gears in a car. Hopefully the intensity is still there, but it's not quite as, because it's winding down. The story is winding down. And sometimes that could be the best part of a book. So at least that's kind of what I'm hoping for. So anyway, long video. Sorry about that. Just want to let people who are still hoping for more chapters know that is in the works, and I'm working on it, and I'm taking my time because I want to do it right. So if you've been watching, thank you.